So the DJI Pocket 3 has been out for a while, and we have declared it one of the best cameras, if not the best compact camera of 2023, and for good reason. It really is a great camera, but there are some things that are not so great about it.
Yeah, we really love it. We have expanded the range of what we can do with pocket cameras when we do our film making, but it's not perfect, and for several reasons you'll hear now, it is not yet our main camera. So let's get into it.
So we have 7 reasons in particular. Number 1 is how you shoot with this camera. It's not as intuitive as shooting with something like the GoPro, which is what we're filming on right now, because for these walk and talk kind of videos, we still prefer our action cameras.
Yeah, the primary reason for that is that the Pocket is on a gimbal, and as such, it is stabilized differently, and you use gimbals differently than a point-and-shoot camera on a stick like an action camera. When you move through space with a gimbal, you have to be conscious of how you're moving through, and methodical and slow. Everything has to be slow, and if you happen to do things quickly, the gimbal will kind of jolt. And what ends up happening is that your footage may be interrupted and you have to redo everything, like recompose, recenter the gimbal, and so on. You don't get the continuous shot that you would get in an action cam like a GoPro.
In fact, if you go through the settings on this camera, the settings are a little bit more complicated because of the gimbal. You have to set, all kinds of things in the gimbal, choose your mode that you're shooting in, and all that affects how the camera and the gimbal move together. And yeah, it is definitely not a point and shoot camera like an action camera or a cell phone.
And I suspect one thing is a bug. When you use follow mode, which on the first Pocket, which we used to be the main mode, sometimes this camera starts looking kind of up, or it gets stuck out there, and you have to recenter it. To avoid that, you can use tilt lock, but then you're stuck in a fixed place and you can't look up or down easily. You have to use a joystick, which then is not as smooth as you moving and not as fast as you moving. So yeah, you don't get the same freedom. When you do certain styles that we like to do, it's like you genuinely want to portray the experience. You actually don't get that out of a camera on a gimbal. With the gimbal, you get a more cinematic type of piece, more intentional shots composed together.
So for that reason, we like to use, you can actually vlog with the Pocket. We're not saying you can't, but just the style is very different. But we like to use this camera in combination with our action camera, which is still our main vlogging camera. The second con to using the Pocket to shoot is that, well, actually it's a pro for a lot of us, is that we can blur out the background. We can get that nice bokeh, and that's good in some cases, but the problem with the Pocket is that pretty much all of your shots are going to have that blurred out background. It's going to focus on the subject that it's closest to, and you don't always want that.
Right, so that also, when you're doing your flow, you're going somewhere, doing stuff and shooting your day as you go, it will not be focusing often at the right thing, or you will focus on something else, and you have to change focus manually, and you have to worry about it and premeditate it, just like with your motions with the gimbal. So you add yet another layer of complexity that you may not want at that point, and it slows you down and it interrupts you. Another thing that comes with this camera being on a gimbal and having so many moving parts is that the camera is not shockproof and not waterproof.
Yes, very, very easy to break. We had the original Osmo Pocket, we have the Pocket 2. We have not used them, as hard as we have with our GoPro, but we haven't had them break personally. But just knowing how fragile all these pieces are, we can imagine how easy it is to break, because we take our action cameras for granted at times, and we're pretty rough with them. We drop them a lot, I want to say. And so you definitely have to be way more careful with this camera.
And especially the way we shoot is often traveling far, and if you bring that camera as your main camera and you drop it on the first day, you don't have a camera for the rest of that trip. And that would be a huge problem. Like Susie said, we have dropped our GoPro many times and it has never actually failed for that reason. One time the media mod failed, but that's a little different.
The media mod is not shockproof,
yeah.
turns out. So there are other pieces, neither is the microphone, if you had a microphone to it. So
right.
There are pieces that can break. But the nice thing about action cameras actually is that we let Julian play with them. He actually does his little vlogs.
A window. It's a window.
And we don't mind because it's an action camera.
Right.
What can he do to it? But I would never, ever let him play with this, because he would destroy this in about
within
5
minutes.
seconds.
Yeah. Yeah, so the shockproof too. And then the second piece, you get caught in the rain, or you get splashed by the lake or something like that. And again, you're out of a camera. You may have to go buy a new one as you're traveling, or you may be unable to at all, and then you interrupt your entire project, which can be a serious loss.
So, we're not being sponsored or paid to make this video, but honestly, I would buy equipment insurance for this camera. Would not necessarily do it for an action camera, but for this camera, I really would, because you just never know. And you don't want to go out and buy a whole new camera just because you broke it. And along the lines of insurance and why you might want to have it for this camera is because the battery is rechargeable, but it's built in. You cannot remove it. And so that's a bit of a bummer. I will say that, you know, the Pocket 3 does come with a battery charging handle. So you can get a few of those, and it's kind of a replacement for not being able to replace the battery. But the bigger concern is if the battery within the camera does die at some point, what do you do?
I think having no spare batteries as well is a very big concern, because if you are on a serious project where you have to go out and shoot all day, and whatever your opportunity there is fleeting, like you're meeting someone just one time ever, you have to make sure your camera can run all day. And if you run out, that's not very good. With GoPro, we often go with 4 batteries into a shoot. If with this, you have to keep on buying more and more handles. Truly, if you wanted to achieve that, that doesn't sound like the best solution to me. So yeah, that's yet another reason why it's hard to take it on a all-day shooting as a main camera. The next thing is that the angle, the lens on the Pocket is actually a little closer than what you would want sometimes, especially if you're vlogging. There is wide angle, but it comes with some trade-offs.
So the wide angle filter is really tiny. It's actually very similar to the one that came with the original Osmo Pocket and the Pocket 2. It extends your field of view out to 15 millimeters, which is pretty nice. But it's very small, easy to lose. There is a little spot that you can put it inside of this little handle to hold it. It holds pretty well, but I admit I have dropped it a couple times unknowingly, so it's not, you know, the most secure hold. But the bigger problem is what it does to your picture quality.
Yeah, so it turns out, as expected, it has some battle distortion, but now we have gotten used to avoiding that on a GoPro with linear mode. And then another thing is that I turned it on late at night in the marina in Cabo this month, and it made all the lights into huge stars, like massive. So I had to take it off. I couldn't use it. So then I was vlogging, and I would see my arm into the shot because I would have to stretch it like this. So it wasn't the best situation to be in.
Now the next point has to do with low light shooting. Now the Pocket 3 is really cool because it has a 1-inch sensor, and it's one of the only compact cameras to have a 1-inch sensor. You know, we've been wanting this on an action camera for a really long time. Only Insta360 has managed to actually do it, but having that 1-inch sensor means that you can shoot in low lighting.
Yeah, I would actually put that at the top of why the Pocket is such a strong camera, and actually we use it in the dark the most. That's when we basically have to take off any other camera, phone or GoPro or whatever, and start using it for restaurants, for night walks and vlogs. But the issue is, you know, you still have to watch out a bit. But to me, it's a huge strength, actually. You gotta know what you're doing.
Yeah, it's really expanded the amount of time we can actually vlog, because it used to be around this time, about sunset, we'd have to start putting the cameras away.
Yeah.
And we don't film after sunset because our cameras just can't handle it. But now with the Pocket 3, we're like, hey, we can start to film, you know, at night in the city. But we did find that this camera still has limitations, which is not, you know, unreasonable. It can't shoot in the dark. So you just have to know how dark you can shoot. And in certain situations, it really does help to have an external light, like when you're shooting food.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, because a lot of what we do on our other channel is go into restaurants and review them in certain travel locations we visit. And there we have had hard time filming because all restaurants almost are dark.
And the final con about shooting with the Pocket 3, it's kind of small. It's not like the worst deal ever, but you know, it does have a USB-C port, but there's no 3.5 millimeter microphone jack. Now you can use a USB-C microphone and connect that, or you can use an adapter to adapt your existing 3.5 millimeter mics. But honestly, a lot of the big mics out there haven't really switched over to USB-C, so it's kind of a hassle if you intend to use an external microphone with this camera.
Yeah, basically none of the reputable directional mics have USB-C jacks. Only the wireless ones do at the moment, so you're quite limited by that.
And you'd have to use a bulky adapter. So yeah, it's not the best choice if you want to add an external microphone that is not wireless.
And so with that said, this is not a negative review by any means. We actually love this camera. We use this camera a lot. We have expanded the range of what we can do in our filmmaking with it a lot. So we actually have glowing reviews about it. This is to say here that it's for a different use case and it's for a different style of shooting, and it does not actually supplant what we've been able to do with our action cams.
Basically, we're still keeping our action cameras. Those are still our primary vlogging cameras. But this is great for shooting at night, shooting in low light, shooting our B-roll, anytime that we need a blurred out background, anytime we need a moving time lapse or motion time lapse. For B-roll, this is just an absolutely great camera. And if you really need to, you can use it for your A-roll as well. But for us, it's a little difficult because of how we like to vlog with our cameras.
Yeah, if you're stationary somewhere, one of us is shooting the other, pointing it correctly and all that, it's a lot easier to use that with a subject who is talking or vlogging. But on the go, while a lot is happening, that's a harder use case.
In fact, we just shot one of our latest videos, you guys should go watch it, about a suitcase, what's in our suitcase, filmed entirely on the Pocket 3. So it is possible.
Yeah, that was fun. And you can see here what kind of shots it's good for.